Timothy Owens was born in the humble Midwestern city of Akron, Ohio in 1967. He was born in the same year as other metal vocalist greats such as Lane Staley, Chuck Schuldiner, and Serge Tankian, and funny enough, just 2 years before Judas Priest formed themselves, the band which he would eventually front. During his formative years, Tim would sing in various choirs growing up. Many a great frontman gets their start in choirs. It teaches one both how to sing lead melodies as well as learning to harmonize with others well. During an interview, when asked why he became a singer, Tim would reply, "It came easy to me probably. At one time, I probably would have rather been a guitar player, but singing was naturally easy for me. I sang in choirs all my life, and when I would sing music, it would just come out. It was easy for me to do." It wasn't until his freshman year of high school in 1983 that Tim discovered metal. His brother would bring home a copy of Judas Priest's excellent Screaming for Vengeance. While he was at first a bit hesitant due to the image of the band on the back, all in leather and metal garb, however, when he listened to it for the first time, it was all over. Tim then became a fanatical metalhead. He would later go on to say that Judas Priest, as well as Lizzie Borden, Savatage, and Metal Church would have huge influences on him. During the 80s, Tim would play in a Metallica tribute band named Damage Inc. Here he would get his first taste of playing in bands and singing on stage. The band would later change their name, ditch the Metallica tribute act, and record a few demos, but nothing would really come of it. They would then split up in 1989. During these early years, Tim would recount how he would refine his vocal skills by singing songs from Judas Priest, Dio, Slayer, King Diamond, Metal Church, Brian Johnson era AC/DC, and even David Bowie. He would recount how initially he would have trouble hitting these real high notes for Bruce Dickinson, Dio, and even Anthrax, but he would continue to grind and learn these songs, ever honing his skills. And having heard this now, you can certainly hear the influence that these singers had on Tim's singing voice. His singing is usually a bit more aggressive than the normal singing, filled with lots of grit and of course his famous wide vibrato and his deadly, deadly high screams. After this, Tim would get his first real serious taste of original work when he joined the band Winter's Bane in the early 90s. He would record and release one album with them in 1993 called Heart of a Killer. Heart of a Killer is a pretty solid debut, which sounds to me a lot like Savatage, but with more refined production. Sort of a Savatage meets Painkiller era Priest. I especially enjoyed the opening track on this called Wages of Sin. However, even on this first real debut, you can tell that the absolute talent that Tim showed. He brought absolute heat to all of these tracks and is easily the standout of the album. During this period, the entire band of Winter's Bane would also simultaneously be a Judas Priest cover band. Calling themselves British Steel, they would play their originals first as Winter's Bane, then they would leave the stage, take a break, change their clothes, come back on stage, and finish the show covering Judas Priest classics as the cover band British Steel. Tim would later get his nickname from the Judas Priest song, The Ripper. It's certainly an interesting self-promotion strategy to be sure, but I suppose in the end I guess it worked out. Around the same time, Rob Halford would actually leave Judas Priest, forcing the band to begin the search for a new singer. The departure and subsequent replacement search made major news in the metal world. The band was bombarded by audition tapes from thousands of hopefuls. However, it was a low-quality tape of Winter's Bane / British Steel performing in Pennsylvania that caught the band's attention. One of the people who actually shot the footage was the girlfriend of Judas Priest's drummer, Scott Travis. Travis then brought the tape to the rest of the band. They loved him, and Owens was then asked to come audition during a recording session in Wales. Supposedly, it only took him singing the first few lines of Victim of Changes for him to get the job. Listening to the Winter's Bane record, it is pretty clear why Tim was chosen. Able to sing in both the lower, more gruff tone and the soaring highs that Rob Halford was known for.
Of how good he was and capable of singing the classic Priest songs one after the other, you know.
Owens would later say he didn't know who was more excited for him having the job, himself or the parents, and you just have to love supportive parents. Thus, in 1996, with Tim Owens now landing the dream job, fulfilling a decade-long dream, and completing a fairy tale story arc of cover band to the real deal, the band went on to record their 13th album and first without Rob Halford, Jugulator. Jugulator is a far more dark and heavier album than any of their previous efforts. Guitars are tuned down to C sharp or even C, and the aggressiveness is turned way up. The band incorporated a lot of thrash and even some groove metal on this release. Obviously, during the period between Jugulator and Painkiller, they had taken some notes on the very huge popularity of Pantera. It's a very heavy record, but at the time, I don't really think people wanted this style of metal from Judas Priest. Painkiller was very melodious while retaining a lot of this aggression, and Painkiller's production was also superb. It had this metallic sheen to it all. It was just great. And to me, this is the biggest flaw of Jugulator. It fell victim to the mid-90s, this dry, sort of dull production. If it would have given the same coat of paint that Painkiller had, I'm sure it would have been much better well received. Although, with that being said, Tim "Ripper" Owens does a great job on this album. And you know, I even like a few of these tracks, namely the epic closer Cathedral Spires, which seems a lot more of that Painkiller-esque priestness to it. Tim would go on touring the world with Judas Priest, singing his own songs from Jugulator, as well as doing justice to a lot of the old classics. Of course, right, he was in a Judas Priest cover band. And you can hear some of these on the live releases, 98 Live Meltdown and Live in London. Tim would also record another album with Judas Priest, that being 2001's Demolition. Demolition, while widely ridiculed by the broader internet community, is actually not all that bad. Continuing the groove metal trend, the band incorporated some of the metal zeitgeist of the time, which of course meant some new metal influence. You know, much to the chagrin of every metal fan from the 80s. To me, listening to this now, it's not nearly as bad as it's made out to be. I mean, sure, there are a few cringy moments, and chasing trends in metal is almost never a great way to win over fans. But to his credit, Ripper does a great job, but it's clear the band didn't really seem to take into account his vocal style when writing a lot of this material. Both of these albums are sort of hidden away and almost pretend like they don't exist now in the Judas Priest camp. The movie Rockstar, which came out in 2001, was supposedly about Tim Owens joining Judas Priest, a story about a tribute band singer joining the real deal, although apparently Judas Priest disavowed the movie after they were denied creative control in the screenplay and the script. Now, who's to say what they fabricated and what they didn't, so who's to know, but it is an interesting anecdote that it was such a notable story that they even made a movie about it. Although Judas Priest would then reunite with Rob Halford again in 2003, and this would where Tim Owens' metal journey would really begin. After the Priest experiment, he would go on to join the power metal outfit Iced Earth, which immediately had a style much more suited to his vocal wheelhouse. Iced Earth had briefly toured with Ripper Priest earlier, so the connection was already there. He would then go on to record 2 albums with Iced Earth, that being 2004's The Glorious Burden, and 2007's Framing Armageddon, Something Wicked, Part 1. The Glorious Burden would also feature drummer Richard Christie of Death fame. I really enjoy the song Decoration Day on here, as well as the massive 3-part epic of Gettysburg. 150 guns made up their cannon. And the album straddles a fine line between patriotism and jingoism, but you know, it's still really enjoyable, and there's a lot of great moments here. Here we could really see Tim Owens really stepping into his own vocally. His singing feels much more natural than on Demolition. Framing Armageddon would actually be my first introduction to the band, as I remember watching the music video for 10,000 Strong, an absolute dog water quality on YouTube when it first came out. To me, 10,000 Strong is absolutely the standout track for me on the Tim Ripper Owens era. The rest of the album is very ambitious. It features tons of choral arrangements, extra instruments, sound effects, and synths. And this is perhaps Tim Owens' strongest performance thus far as well. He sounds excellent and is absolutely in top form, showing much versatility in his singing as well. Lie awake, I have no memory of... In between these Iced Earth albums, Tim would reunite with Winter's Bane member Dennis Hayes, who together would form a new band called Beyond Fear, and they would release one self-titled album in 2006. And to me, this is what Jugulator should have been. This is almost Painkiller Part 2. Heavy, melodic, and fast with soaring vocals. You know, Tim Owens really wears his influences on his sleeves here. You know, this is an excellent, underrated release. In an interview, Tim would state that, "I think Beyond Fear was my first real big step. Because I wrote half the music and all of the vocals and everything, I think that was my first real big step."
Close your eyes for something.
In 2008, it was announced that after being cast out from Iced Earth, the Ripper would then be joining Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. After releasing 2 albums with Yngwie, he would again be forced to part ways due to scheduling conflicts with his solo band. This era of Yngwie is very hit or miss for me. The production is really what happens these releases here. And you know, Owens does his job very well as hired gun on these 2 releases. Damnation Game is probably the best track from these 2 releases.
Freedom, I paid a price. I keep on searching, never seem to find.
In 2009, Owens released his first solo record entitled Play My Game. Supported by a large cast of other notable musicians, it is an enjoyable heavy metal record. I enjoy the songs Starting Over and Play My Game. In 2011, Tim Owens also joined the Dio Disciples, which featured former Dio members and would cover Dio songs. Following his departure from Yngwie's band, we move on to my personal favorite Ripper Owens release, that being the first Charred Walls of the Damned album. Featuring an absolutely stacked lineup of Richard Christie and Steve DiGiorgio, continuing the Death and Iced Earth connection, as well as producer Jason Sweekoff, who produced many excellent records, including Nocturnal by the Black Dahlia Murder, The Crusade by Trivium, and Overcome by All That Remains, among many, many, many others. Just check his Wikipedia page, it's crazy. Charred Walls of the Damned is an absolute ripper of an album, incorporating a lot of more modern influences, including tremolo picking, blast beats, and even some almost breakdowns. Really some excellent stuff, and it's cool to see Tim Owens perform over top of music like this. And of course, I just love hearing Richard Christie and Steve DiGiorgio play their instruments. I really like this album, and if there's anything you should check out from this video, I highly recommend this be it. Tim Owens also owned Ripper's Rock House, which was a sports bar, a restaurant, and an entertainment venue in Akron, Ohio, his hometown. In August 2015, Bar Rescue filmed and transformed the bar into Tim Owens' Traveler's Tavern, although unfortunately the venue closed permanently in September 2016. He is also the owner of Ripper Owens Tap House, which was the predecessor to Ripper's Rock House, also in Akron, Ohio. He would go on to record 2 more Charred Walls of the Damned records, and here it is where Owens really began to become the hired gun mercenary of metal bands. I mean, just look at all these appearances and features. Truly mind-boggling the amount of music this man has made. Surely he has to be one of the most busiest men in metal, maybe then one of the most prolific as well. Like, this is just crazy. In 2019, he would again find himself playing with Steve DiGiorgio on the project Spirits of Fire. This supergroup consisted of Savatage guitarist Chris Caffrey and Fate's Warning drummer Mark Zonder. Coming full circle in a way, it really feels like Savatage, a more modern Savatage with DiGiorgio's rumbling bass, Caffrey's excellent guitar playing. Tim Owens would even find himself reuniting with KK Downing and KK's Priest in 2021 after KK split with Judas Priest, releasing 2 albums with him. And it really makes a ton of sense why Tim was just so prolific here. Guy is a great vocalist and a consummate professional. In an interview, he states that he does not drink on tour. He simply shows up, sings his heart out, and then goes back to the hotel. No drama, no fuss, doesn't talk to anybody, so no worrying about the voice. Anyone who has sung in a band knows that it is hard to sit around after a show and attempt to talk to people while music is blaring around you. You kind of have to yell at them. That can really strain your voice, so Tim Owens is a very smart man by simply going home after the show. In 2022, he would again release some more solo music. His EP Return to Death Row is yet again another solid outing for the veteran singer.
My return to death row.
very fast and intense music here again. So yeah, let me know, what are your thoughts on Tim Owens R? Do you like his voice? What are his favorite appearances and records that he is on? I'm always curious to hear your thoughts, and yeah, of course, let me know about this new sort of biography series. I'm going to try to do that. And with that, I'm out, you guys. Like and subscribe. Peace.